Hey drummers, Garey Williams is here, and welcome to another reaction and analysis video. In today's video, we're going to check out the legendary Gene Krupa. So I'm sure you've heard this guy before, and you're going to want to be able to check him out. So here we go, Gene Krupa. Okay, I'm just going to pause it here. Something to note, this is very early on in the development of jazz music. The drum set was born through jazz music. And apparently Gene Krupa is one of the first drummers that asked the drum companies to put tunable lugs or tunable bottom heads, because a lot of the earlier drums, you had lugs and tension rods for the top head, so you could tension the top head, but then the bottom heads were still tacked on. These were calfskin heads at the time, not plastic heads that we know today. And so he was one of the first drummers that said, well, can you make the bottom head tunable as well, so I can tune both top and bottom head. But this was during a time when drummers didn't use cymbals to keep time with all that often. When you look at some of the early big band notation, it's like 4 quarter notes with a snare roll on beat 2. But bzz, but bzz, but 2, 3, 4. So early drumming was reminiscent of military style snare drumming. And then of course the bass drum was added and pedals and so on, and the drum set was born. But if you watch carefully here, you'll see that he's playing on the snare drum. And his hand right now, where I've paused the video, is in what we call a stick shot position, where instead of doing a rim shot, where you obviously hit the rim and the center of the head with the stick, this is where you strike the stick when the other stick is a dead stroke or buried, the tips placed against the head, held down by the left hand. As you can see, he's got thumb and 2 fingers over the stick there, holding it down, and the right stick is striking the left stick. So not a rim shot, a stick shot. So he's doing hi-hats on 2 and 4. So let's carry on. One, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Straight 8s. Notice how that felt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, so he ended the fill with a crash and then came back into time. Now, in our rock background, for those of us that play mostly that style of music, the crash is on the 1. But in those early days, this is a reminiscent of New Orleans Dixieland music, where the drummer would do a break and then he'd hit the choke splash cymbal on 4. Why? So as not to interrupt the beginning of the solo that came on the beginning of the next 16 bar or 8 bar phrase. So this is sort of that tradition that's brought forward with the way he played that solo and that drum break. And you can see how low the hi-hat cymbals are. Hopefully the camera will get in such an angle, but it looks like the hi-hat cymbals are actually level with the snare, if not maybe slightly under. There's a video clip of Buddy Rich playing with the Artie Shaw Orchestra, Artie Shaw being a clarinet player. And you can see him actually riding under his left hand, because the original hi-hat was actually a cymbal strapped, actually mounted to the bass drum hoop, and then the bass drum beater would have a little rod that would come off the side. So as you struck the beater with the felt beater, the bass drum with the felt beater, the rod would actually hit the cymbal. So you would marry kind of this clangy cymbal sound. That got moved over to the left foot in what became the snowshoe cymbal beater, because they would mount these 2 cymbals one on top of each other, and sometimes it was called a sock cymbal because it made sort of a sock kind of sound. Other people theorize it's because it's sock level. But anyways, 2 boards with a spring-loaded hinge and a leather strap, so you could kind of move your left foot, since the right foot now could be separate sound. Bass drum on the right foot, a sock cymbal on the left. This became the lowboy, a miniature, short little hi-hat stand that could only be pedaled with a foot. And you can see some old video clips in the famous big band drummer videos where drummers were actually keeping time on the snare drum but snapping that lowboy. So the hi-hat came about by taking the tube and extending it up to a height where you could actually start to play the cymbals, not only closing with your foot but striking with your hands. So you could use the left foot for muffling and then the right hand for timekeeping instead of both hands on the cymbal. So let's carry on here. Grip.
At this point, the boys in the band and myself take you on a jam session to the tune of Leave Us Leap.
Okay, time on the hi-hat. Back time on the snare. Bass, bass. Back to the A section. 1. On the hi-hat. This is catch that ba ba da. Left hand on the snare. Bridge. Bass drum. Tight hi-hat for the piano solo. Listen to that, playing off the side of the hi-hat stand. Wow, see, here we go. Oh, nice. Great cymbal fill. Shadow off to the right. They always put spotlights on it. Triplets. Yo! Yeah! So cool. Oh, whoa. D-D-D. Oh, whoa. I guess we're done now. That was awesome. Short little clip there. Let me pull this out of here so we can talk about this man's awesome drumming. Wrong button. Okay, great. the famous Gene Krupa. Now we know him originally from Sing, 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 this composition by the Benny Goodman Orchestra, where he was featured doing kind of a jungle drum floor tom solo. But somebody sent me this, said this is one of my favorite clips. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sending this in, because I did a little browsing, but I didn't see too much. But this one actually offered a couple of different segments, different tempos, different aspects of the early style of jazz drumming, where we're playing more time on the snare with the swing fill, stick shots, rim shot. And then the love, that last tune with the beautiful use of space. Talk about almost like when there's instant silence in a room and everybody goes, what's going on? Because you're used to sort of like sound. So sometimes that space is much more dramatic when it's silent. That spot silent space. So he really used that effectively. Of course, the showmanship. Some of you have seen this drummer. I don't remember his name, but it's this drummer's at the wrong gig. And this guy that does all this amazing stuff. Well, he talked about his early influence was the swing era drummers, especially Gene Krupa, because Gene Krupa was quite a showman. He was actually kind of a movie star. He looked very charismatic, handsome guy, always smiling, grinning. And there was actually the Gene Krupa story. There was movies about this guy. So it's fairly interesting when you hear about him. My father got to see him. My father passed away quite a few years ago, but he remembers the fact that when he saw him, he was up on a riser and it was in a gymnasium. They had a spotlight on either front of the stage. So basically the spotlights pointed up. So on the back window, or back, wall of the gymnasium, you had this huge, magnificent, larger than life, almost like shadow of Gene Krupa. And he would do all this kind of stuff. And what I liked is how he would play with the match grip. He also wrote on the hi-hat in the second tune, which was really nice, through a portion of that, solos, and then back to the snare. But then the idea that when he got into the drumming with the triplets, he actually played match grip. When he went to that little splash cymbal break, beautiful stuff. Everything's based upon the structure. The first tune was like an AABA tune, and I believe the second one was as well. I didn't really analyze the form too closely, but there was definite repetitive phrasing, and the method by which these people soloed was over certain phrases, certain chord progressions. It wasn't just this open kind of arena rock style solo. It was all within the context of the musical format or form of the tune. So some other stuff I'm sure that would be really great to see. I've watched some other video clips, some of the famous big band drummers. I've owned some videotapes from way back, or there's compilations that have been put out where you can watch some of these great drummers. If you're really interested in learning more about the history and evolution of the drum set, I highly recommend a DVD by Daniel Glass called The Century Project, 100 Years of American Music from Behind the Drums, 1865 to 1965. It's fantabulous, and you'll learn so much. After watching that, I felt like I actually played the drums better, having an understanding more so of the historical progress of the development of the drum set, which was born in jazz music and then moved on to other genres of music. So anyways, this was a really fascinating clip. I'm glad you got a chance to watch it. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and all the notification bell stuff. If you're interested in instruction, check the check box, or look in the text box below. There's information on how you can get a hold of me. And then I'll see you on the next reaction and analysis video. Until then, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.